This video was brought to you by NordVPN. While all of the media's attention has understandably been focused on Israel recently, in the background, there's been another crisis brewing in Syria, where two NATO allies, the US and Turkey, have been spatting ever since a US fighter drone shot down a Turkish drone earlier this month. In some sense, this was sort of inevitable. Turkey's been complaining about US support for Kurds in northern Syria for the best part of a decade now. But the US and the rest of NATO have different strategic priorities in the Middle East, and as such, have mostly been ignoring Erdogan's warnings. So in this video, we're taking a look at what's happening in northern Syria, how it interacts with the escalating instability elsewhere in the Middle East, and what might happen next. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. So to understand this story, you need to understand a bit about the Kurds, and more specifically, the issue of Kurdish separatism in Turkey. By the way, this is something we've been meaning to make a video about for quite a while now, but once you understand quite how anxious Turkey is about the so-called Kurdish question, and conversely, quite how little attention the rest of NATO pays to it, a lot of today's geopolitics suddenly makes a lot more sense. Anyway, the Kurds are a large Middle Eastern ethnic group, mostly based in southeast Syria, northwest Iraq, and west Iran. All in all, there are some 30 million Kurds living in the region, and they're often described as the world's largest nation without a state. Now, a Kurdish state was proposed after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire at the 1919 Paris Peace Conference, and the Treaty of Sèvres gave the Kurds their own smaller autonomous region within Turkey, with an option to secede if they voted for independence within a year. Unfortunately for the Kurds, though, Turkey didn't like this, and after winning the Turkish War of Independence, Turkey successfully superseded the Treaty of Sèvres with the Treaty of Luzern, which returned Kurdistan to Turkey with no means for independence. Ever since then, there's been a latent Kurdish separatist movement in Turkey, where roughly 20 million Kurds currently live. Now, this all came to a head in the 80s, when the pro-independence Kurdish Workers' Party, commonly known as the PKK, started fighting an insurgency war against the Turkish state. Now, the PKK lost relevance in the late 80s due to serial infighting and waning popularity among ordinary Kurds, but they were rejuvenated by the creation of an autonomous Kurdish region in northern Iraq in 1999, which was facilitated by the establishment of a UN-backed no-fly zone over northern Iraq that year. And Iraqi Kurdistan proved to be a safe haven and inspiration for the PKK, and their insurgency resumed in earnest in the 2000s. Given the conflict has now lasted nearly 50 years and claimed over 40,000 lives, it should come as no surprise that the so-called Kurdish question is probably Turkey's #1 foreign policy priority. Anyway, this is why Erdogan was so annoyed when in 2014, a US-led coalition decided to join forces with a Kurdish militia called the YPG in order to beat back ISIS in Syria and Iraq. That's because Erdogan saw the YPG as an offshoot of the PKK, which is why Turkey designates it as a terrorist organization. And it worried that Western support for the YPG in Syria would encourage the PKK in Turkey. Erdogan was especially upset in the late 2010s, when the Kurds established their own de facto state in northern Syria along the Syria-Turkey border. As such, Turkey intervened against the Syrian Kurds in 2016, 2018, and 2019, when the Turkish army staged a ground invasion just a few days after Trump announced the withdrawal of US troops from parts of northern Syria. Anyway, today the Turkish state de facto controls two non-contiguous territories within Syria, which acts as sort of a buffer zone between Kurdish-occupied Syria and Turkey proper. Here, locals use the lira, civil servants are paid by the Turkish state, and the electricity comes from southern Turkey's electricity grid. Anyway, for the past year or so, Erdogan has been threatening another intervention, which finally happened earlier this month when Turkey launched a barrage of missiles and drone attacks on key infrastructure in Kurdish areas, apparently in response to a PKK terror attack on a government building in Ankara. Now, one of these drones was actually shot down by the US, which still has 23 military bases and over 900 troops in Kurdish-controlled parts of Syria. The Pentagon said that they shot down the Turkish aircraft in self-defense after it entered a US-restricted territory where US Special Forces were hiding in a bunker. But this really didn't go down well with Turkey. In a furious tirade, Erdogan accused the US of training and armoring a terrorist organization and turning the Middle East into a bloodbath.
Şu anda ben burada bir şeyi açıklamak zorundayım. Bakın bir Suriye'de bugün 20'nin üzerinde Amerika'nın üssü var. Suriye'de Amerika'nın üslerinin ne işi var? Bu üslerle ne yapılıyor? İşimize geldiği zaman bütün terör örgütlerini maalesef Amerika şu anda eğitiyor, yetiştiriyor, silahlandırıyor ve bunlarla da maalesef yine Suriye'de olsun, bu bölgede olsun, Orta Doğu'da olsun buraları kan gölüne dönüştürüyor.
One of Erdogan's security advisors then went a step further when he seemed to threaten an all-out war with America live on Turkish television. And on Tuesday, Turkey pointedly extended its mandate in northern Syria for another 2 years, paving the way for further intra-NATO tensions. In some sense, this recent tension was kind of inevitable. Turkey and the US have been fighting on different sides of a conflict for more than a decade now, and neither side intends to back down. Turkey sees Kurdish separatism as the paramount threat to the Turkish state, and the escalating instability in the Middle East will only exacerbate Ankara's anxieties. Similarly, the US doesn't want to get out of Syria because its withdrawal would either create a power vacuum, which will be filled by Assad and Russia, which is what happened after Trump withdrew from parts of northern Syria in 2009, or possibly even make space for ISIS. There's also been some suggestion that the US has an interest in the oil reserves of northern Syria. And while the US officially denies this, not least because seizing oil on a foreign territory would be a violation of international law, in 2019, Trump did give a truly extraordinary press conference where he said that the US was only in Syria for the oil.
We're keeping the oil. We have the oil. The oil is secure. We left troops behind only for the oil.
Somewhat understandably, this has become a major talking point in both Chinese and Russian media, and Vladimir Putin actually mentioned it during a press conference in Iran last year. For context, while Syria isn't a major oil exporter, most of its oil fields are in the Kurdish-controlled areas near the border. Oil production collapsed during the civil war, but in 2020, the Trump administration authorized a tiny American company called Delta Crescent to do a deal with the Kurdish authorities to restart oil production in the area. Although the terms of the agreement required that over 90% of all revenues return to the Kurdish authorities. However, it should be said that the Biden administration refused to renew the company's sanctions waiver, and John Kirby insisted that the US troops were not authorized to assist any private companies in the area. Whatever the case, the TLDR is that neither Turkey nor the US plans on getting out of Syria anytime soon. And the escalating instability in the Middle East is only going to exacerbate tensions by inflaming Turkish anxieties about Kurdish separatism and reinforcing the idea that America needs a permanent presence in the region. With news like this constantly filling the headlines, it's easy to feel like the world is getting less safe. Fortunately though, when it comes to your digital safety, NordVPN has your back. It's an unfortunate reality that online scams and phishing attacks are on the rise at the moment. With us constantly bombarded by emails from our banks, social media accounts, and annoying newsletters we forgot we even signed up to, it's easy to click the wrong thing. And one weak link can compromise security and bring things crashing down. With the protection of NordVPN though, you can use their threat protection features to identify potentially suspicious links. And even if you did reach a suspicious website, NordVPN's data encryption tools will protect against a number of other attacks, including malicious man-in-the-middle breaches. Even if things do go wrong though, NordVPN's dark web monitoring service is always scanning your details and passwords, and can actively notify you before you even notice something has gone wrong. Plus, if you sign up now for a 2-year plan using our link, you'll not only get a massive discount, but you'll also get 4 extra months totally free. Now, we've been told that sometimes when people hear us talk about NordVPN, they just open up a new tab and start searching, but don't actually use our link. Now, I'm certainly glad that they get to use the service regardless, but you only get the discount and you only support the channel if you use our link. So if you're trying to improve our journalism by signing up to Nord, then use our link when you do. That way, you'll get their great service at a discount and support TLDR.